Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. On behalf of the entire team at Manage Engine, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for taking time off from your busy schedules for joining us for our webinar today. So my name is Siddharth, or just Sid, if that's easier, and I'm from the IT Security Solutions team at Manage Engine, and I'm going to be your presenter for today's webinar. So I hope you can hear me loud and clear, and I hope you can also see my shared screen. That is my presentation that says everything you need to know about ransomware. So in case you have any difficulties with the audio or with viewing my presentation, do reach out to us on the live chat option in the webinar console so that we can try and solve the problem immediately. I'm also joined by our technical support team from File Audit Plus. We'll look at more into this over the course of the webinar, which is a file auditing tool from Manage Engine. So I've got the technical support team also connected on the webinar. So over the course of the webinar, anytime you have a question, you can reach out to us on the live chat, and our tech support team will answer your product-related questions. And also at the end of the webinar, I'll take a live Q&A session if possible. So make sure you keep your questions coming through the webinar, and we can try to I can try to answer them live so that everyone can benefit from the discussion. Right, so I guess that's about it with the routine housekeeping stuff. Just one more thing, we'll be sending you the webinar recording and the slide deck within a day or two. So don't worry about that. You'll be getting the webinar recording and the slide deck as well. Right, so I'm just going to wait for a few seconds to ensure that everyone is okay with the webinar setup. Do keep some of you already pinged us on the live chat, so keep your questions coming. Do engage with us on the live chat. We've got myself as well as the tech support team joining in for the webinar, so take advantage of that and keep engaging with us over the next 30-35 minutes of the webinar. And we'll also have an engagement at the end of the session so that you can get all your questions clarified. Right, so without further ado, let's get started with today's webinar. So here's what we have planned for you today. So here's what we have planned today. I think we just lost the audio for a moment. This is the agenda for today's webinar. We'll be looking at the history and the evolution of ransomware and why it's become such a big problem today. We look at understanding how, in a practical scenario, how ransomware actually gets launched and the pattern of the attack. We look at some best practices that you can implement in your organization. A lot of them are for free. So we'll go over some of these so that you can reduce the chance of being hit by ransomware in your organization. And then we look at something that's really, really important, which is achieving real-time incident detection and response. Right, so because we're going to be looking at some best practices to prevent ransomware, and we can't completely prevent ransomware, so we're also going to be looking at a solution which can do real-time detection of threats such as ransomware and immediately take automated and immediately automatically respond and shut down the threat, in this case ransomware. So we've got a solution from Manage Engine that can do just that, which is File Audit Plus. We look more into File Audit Plus over the course of the webinar. So yeah, so this is what we've got planned for you today. We'll just look at some of the basics of ransomware, why it's so powerful and effective today, and exactly how it works. We'll then look at some best practices that we can implement to reduce the chance of being hit by ransomware, and we'll also prepare for detecting and responding to ransomware in case you get hit by an attack. Right, so this is the webinar agenda. If you want to discuss things over and above this, make use of the live chat and keep asking your questions, and our tech support team will answer them for you. Right, so this is the most dreaded screen for any security team, and this is what we all want to defeat, right? So most of us here today by now know what ransomware is. It's of course a type of malware that can encrypt your data and demand ransom for decryption. So it's almost like very Hollywood-esque, it gives you a message like this that says your files are being decrypted. You've got a countdown that you can see on the left, which says you have this much time to pay the ransom. So it's pretty scary, really, because just the very nature of the attack and it being called ransomware itself is 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 quite scary, I think. So we don't want this to happen, of course. So we're going to start off by looking at how ransomware came into being and why it is such a big problem today. So a little bit about the history of ransomware. So it actually came about a while back, about 25, 26 years ago in 1989. And that's about 30 years ago, actually. And back then, it was actually a bit of a failure, right? Because no one really was concerned about ransomware 30 years ago. And the reason for that is, of course, because it was at a much more primitive stage back then. And it had very basic, rudimentary encryption techniques. And also you have to remember, and if some of you have actually been in IT for over 15, 20 years, you will know that networks back then weren't connected the way they are today, right? Because networks and the LAN and everything was so much different back then 30 years ago, which made it really difficult for ransomware to propagate across an organization like the way it can today. But things started to change in the 2000s with the dot-com bubble and worldwide internet access. And that made ransomware more powerful as it could target systems, more systems, it could target more systems and inevitably end up hitting something of value, right? So in the 2000s, it with the advancements in networking and the dot-com bubble, ransomware also could become more powerful because it could spread across a larger network. And then of course in 2010, with Bitcoin becoming a thing, that was again all the more that made ransomware even more powerful because now people could get the ransom payment through Bitcoin, which made it untraceable, right? So cyber criminals obviously now prefer ransomware because it gives them the anonymity in payment, and it's also become highly profitable, right? Because I mean, of course, I don't know how many of you have invested in Bitcoin, but I mean, you all know that it is a bubble in a sense, but let's not get into that. But the point is, in with Bitcoin and the dark web and anonymity in payment, ransomware has become all the more powerful because hackers know that they can get away with an attack because of the anonymity in payment. And then because of all of these developments, we had a lot of ransomware attacks across the world last year. Strains of WannaCry, Petya, Locky, Zepto, all of these things. I'm sure a lot of you have read about these strains of ransomware, and variations of these strains are still causing damage as we speak. And what it's also done is that all these developments have created a new industry called ransomware as a service, right? So just like you have software as a service, which is SaaS, as it's popularly known, you also have ransomware as a service, or RAS, right? And this is something for the bad guys. So believe it or not, there's actually ransomware starter kits available, and hackers can purchase these so that they can carry out a ransomware attack. Meaning, ransomware itself is being sold as a service to the bad guys, and they can carry out attacks very easily. So for them, it's as simple as just investing a certain amount of money in purchasing ransomware as a service, and then launching ransomware to their to whatever they're targeting, and then they make more money out of that to cover the costs for purchasing the service. So it's actually a business model that is becoming popular among hackers, which is because they know ransomware is deadly. It's very hard to stop. It also because of Bitcoin and the anonymity, it's also difficult for people to catch the person launching a ransomware attack. And as a result, it's led to a whole new industry of ransomware as a service, which essentially is a service for the bad guys, right? So the final point really is enough reason for all of us to be concerned about ransomware and start preparing for our defenses against ransomware, right? The number of potential victims, the high chance of a ransom payout, the low risk of getting caught, and the low effort needed to launch an attack makes ransomware ideal for attackers, right? Because ransomware, they know that we all care about our data. So if they're going to encrypt our data and block our access to the data, all of us, we don't have a choice. We data is so important to us that we end up paying the ransom. So the final point in the slide is really just to summarize how ransomware has become so powerful today and why all of us and all organizations across the world need to be wary of ransomware and almost sort of dedicate a portion of their IT security program just to stop ransomware in their environment. Right. So we saw a little bit about the history. So this is the attack. This is the attack pattern. This is the attack pattern of typical ransomware attacks, right? Because yes, there are different strains of ransomware and different ways they exactly proliferate across the network. But this is typically the attack pattern, right? So it starts off with phishing. Like most cyber attacks, it starts off with phishing. It could be a website, a malicious website that a user in your organization may unwilling, without knowing, might go and download something or click something. It could be phishing email. 90% of cyber attacks today start with phishing. 90%. So ransomware, being one of the most common types of cyber attacks, also starts with phishing. And then what happens is when a user clicks or downloads an attachment, the ransomware payload gets executed on their system, and then it's going to immediately start encrypting data, their files, their folders, their databases, their entire operating system even. And it's going to do that, and then it's going to, when you try to click on the file, it's going to demand ransom for decryption, right? So it's going to encrypt everything, and then it's going to show that ransom notice that we saw a couple of slides ago, and it's going to say pay this amount. It's typically Bitcoin worth about $300 is what a lot of ransomware attacks have been demanding. So it's going to say pay $300 in Bitcoin within a certain period of time, after which your data is lost forever. It's encrypted forever. Even the key cannot restore the data for you. And then it doesn't stop here. It spreads across the network, affecting other users' systems, your file servers, your databases. It's going to spread across your network and potentially can go around and encrypt all the data and files and folders and databases in your organization. All starts off with one phishing attack. Not only does that particular user have his system encrypted, but potentially that same the ransomware can proliferate across your network and affect every other system as well. And that is a big concern. The fourth block, spreading across your network, because the strains of ransomware have become so clever today. And in fact, last year, I think it was in June or July, when there was an outbreak of a strain of Petya ransomware. And while this was happening, Petya was so advanced that it could actually figure out the list of IP addresses in your network and then spread to those target IP addresses, right? And it used very advanced techniques to obtain credentials from all the different machines in the network. So it could use, say, Windows. It could look into Windows Credential Manager and things like that, which is absolutely horrifying because this is really advanced stuff that we're dealing with. And that is the biggest problem with ransomware today, that it can spread really fast across your network, potentially infecting all your files and shares. And in fact, I just wanted to make a point about this, and we'll come back to this in a couple of slides later. It is it is that ransomware like Petya, it made use of this vulnerability. I'm sure some of you might have heard of this, the eternal blue exploit. And this is what they use to propagate themselves um, across the network in addition to the classic SMB technique. So it's that advanced. Ransomware, the strains of ransomware that we see keep getting more and more advanced because the earliest strains of WannaCry ransomware used to use the classic the SMB technique to spread across the network, and then uh, the more advanced strains started to use the new exploits that come to be known in Windows, and they evolve so fast that they're able to make use of the vulnerabilities and spread across the network. Right. So I just wanted to mention that because we're now going to be looking at how to reduce the chance of being hit by an attack. And the first step, of course, is you can try to fix these vulnerabilities, right? Because we know that ransomware spreading across the network is a huge concern, and it's going to spread across the network through these different vulnerabilities. So fixing vulnerabilities and patching your systems, that can go a long way in reducing the chance of being hit by an attack. And of course, you want to implement best practices. You want to implement best practices that, again, reduce the chance of being hit by an attack. We're going to go over these in the next slide, but I just wanted to give you an overview here as to how to approach the problem of ransomware, right? So we now know exactly how dangerous ransomware is. We know how it works, at least on a high level. We know how the attack pattern takes place, and we know how ransomware is able to spread across the network. So in preparing for the defense against ransomware, the first thing we need to focus on is reducing the chance of being hit by an attack. So this can reduce, there's no exact number, but think about it as you're reducing the chance by say 90-95%. It's still not a perfect system because ransomware is just so powerful today that we need to also have incident detection and response in place. You want to reduce the chance of being hit by an attack, yes, but over and above that, you also want to ensure that in case something goes wrong and in case you do get hit by an attack, you're in a position to immediately detect and respond to the incident. And we're going to be doing that by leveraging specialized auditing technology, right? We're going to do incident detection and response by leveraging specialized auditing technology, which is where Manage Engine File Audit Plus comes into the picture. We'll go over these in the next few slides, of course, but I just want to give you an overview of the approach to the strategy to combat ransomware. And of course, the final point is to prepare for the worst. This is assuming that your preventive measures and your best practices fail, your incident detection and response also fails. You still need to be prepared for the worst, which is where recovery and backup comes into the picture. So we're going to go over each of these points over the next few slides, and we're going to give specific focus to incident detection and response. And I'll also show you how exactly you can set up this kind of alerting with File Audit Plus in a few over the course of the next 10 to 15 minutes. Right. So here are the best practices, and administrators love this because a lot of this is free, a lot of this is extremely effective, and well, there's nothing like free best practices that actually give you results, right? This is the best thing possible. So the first thing, and the reason I've actually put this on number one, is user education. And the reason I put this number one is because we saw that most attacks start with phishing. So if you have an organization whose employees are very aware of cyber risks, the chances of or the chances of them falling for a phishing scam is obviously going to be a lot lesser if they know about phishing. So I mean, people like you or me or my tech support team joining in for the webinar, we are probably not going to fall for a phishing scam. But I'm sure most, even in an organization of 1,000, even if 2 or 3 employees fall for a phishing attack, because ransomware can spread across a network, it can potentially still affect the users who are careful. So all it takes is that one user who makes a mistake, right? So you don't want that to happen, because you can't say, oh, most of my enterprise knows. But even if 1 or 2 users fall for a phishing attack, ransomware can potentially spread across your entire network and affect even the users who were careful. So this is very important. Try to do email campaigns within your organization. Send out emails. Incentivize the employees. Try to keep small events occasionally every few months. Just a half an hour, 45-minute presentation with prizes. Just get as creative as you can. Make sure you're doing this, because this is better than even the most advanced security solution, right? And I'm saying this despite working despite working in a security company. I'm still saying this, that user education is going to trump everything else. Make sure you have this. You're going to be, depending on the size of your organization, you might be spending hundreds and thousands of dollars in IT security, but user education is free and it can give better results than any advanced solution. So do this. I keep stressing on this in different sessions. User education, be as creative as you can. Send out the message to all your employees that there are bad guys out there on the internet. Be careful while accessing emails and websites while in office. Right, so this is number one. Number two, patching vulnerabilities, right? We know, again, ransomware is going to spread across your network through different vulnerabilities. So we want to ensure that, to the extent possible, our environment has all the latest patches and all systems are running the latest software. So we want to ensure this to the extent possible. And a good way to do this is to use a patch management tool, so that you have a proper testing and deployment process. And anytime a new fix is available, all your systems are running the latest updated software. And this is very strange, because even before WannaCry had the outbreak last year around April, Microsoft actually provided a patch to fix the vulnerability that WannaCry exploited a month before the attack happened. So a month before the attack happened, a patch is available. Microsoft released the patch, but despite that, hundreds and thousands of systems across the globe were not patched and ended up getting affected by the attack. So this is something that, again, we can prevent. It's not rocket science. It doesn't require a cutting edge team of 20 people with cutting edge security solutions. Points number 1 and 2, user education and patching vulnerabilities, is something that can be done without much effort and yields results even better than everything else. So these two are the most important best practices that you need to be focusing on. And then, of course, you have other things. You want to ensure email filtering. If that is something that you can include in your security program, that would be great, because, again, a lot of attacks start through phishing. Enforce least privilege. Provide the least amount of privilege possible, because organizations often provide more access rights to their employees than is needed, and they do this because of convenience. And we've seen this so many times in different implementations that we've gone to. And 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 why do we do this? I don't understand why organizations do this. And most people say because this way we don't have to slow down if and when users require extra permissions. But the downside of doing this is that it just automatically increases the potential attack surface for any ransomware attack. You don't want several systems in your organizations having elevated privileges. So instead, what you can do is use robust access management to restrict any unwarranted access and reduce the number of access points through which ransomware can enter and spread through your organization. So provide least privilege, or try to see if you can do just-in-time privilege if that works in your organization. Don't hand out privileges to different machines for fun, because that only increases the chances of ransomware gaining access to a system with elevated privileges. And of course, you want to block known malicious IP addresses. You can do this by leveraging threat intelligence solutions, integrating them with a SIM solution if you're using one. So that's again a good thing that you can have in place to reduce the chance of being hit by an attack. And of course, you also want to strictly monitor at the download and use of third-party software. So this is again application whitelisting, and adding acceptable software to your whitelist can again help block unauthorized programs from running. So, and then of course, the last point, which says do not pay the hackers, right? This might seem strange, but in case you get hit by ransomware, do not pay the hackers, because hackers know that if you're paying them, that they find this as an even more profitable venue to carry out more attacks, which is how ransomware as a service came into being, because people were paying to recover the data because people care about the data. So what for the hackers, it's just like, oh, okay, so if I carry out another ransomware attack, more people are going to pay. So really there's no point in paying ransomware attacks, because simply because there's no guarantee that ransomware just because you pay that ransomware is going to um, decrypt the encrypted files, because there's no proof, no security expert can say with certainty that if you pay the ransomware, your files are going to be decrypted. There's no guarantee of that. So there is one thing that you can do, the best practice. So if you were wondering why I said do not pay the hackers, and if you were wondering, wait a minute, if I don't pay the hackers, does that mean I lose my data? Well, if you have a backup system in place, you don't lose anything. It's as simple as that. This is the ultimate best practice, even better than even better than patching vulnerabilities and user education, because this is the only guarantee of recovery from ransomware, right? The only sure shot guarantee. Everything else has so many ifs and buts. This will never fail. If you have a proper system of backup and recovery in place, that is a recovery solution in place, then even if you get hit by ransomware, you are in a position to restore that system's availability by using your backup. You don't have to pay the hackers. This is the ultimate best practice. So make sure, if you don't have a backup and recovery system in place in your environment, as soon as this webinar gets over, make sure that that becomes your focus for your IT security program, because this is the most simple, elegant, effective solution to stop ransomware or any cyber attack. Really, having backup, just do it. Right. So we looked at a few best practices that we need to have in place, but check check. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think we've got a bit of a network issue. I'm so sorry about that. I'm so sorry about that. I think a few of our attendees had a bit of an audio problem in the last couple of minutes. I hope it's all right now. We've just reconnected to the network. My sincere apologies for that. This was obviously unforeseen. Can you just confirm if, yeah, I think a couple of people have said that we are connected now. I once again really sorry about that. That was obviously unforeseen. We were just to summarize what we were looking at. We were just looking at best practices to prevent ransomware, and the top three things that you need to focus on. We saw were backup, the only sure shot way of recovering from ransomware, and of course you want to ensure that your users are educated and your patches are all deployed and your vulnerabilities are fixed. So those things that we saw, I hope most of you are reconnected to the webinar now, and I hope we don't see any more issues till the end of the webinar. But what we want to look at now is, well, we've seen how we can reduce the chance of being hit by an attack, which is of course great, really important. But in case ransomware still hits our environment for whatever reason, we still need to be prepared to detect and respond to the incident, right? Because the preventive measures can reduce the chance by say 90-95% can prevent ransomware. But still, there is always the chance that ransomware still gets launched in our environment. And here is where incident detection and response comes into the picture. Here is where auditing and SIEM and all of those ideas come into the picture. Because if you're tracking important changes and important activity on your files and folders, you can detect ransomware activity in real time and take steps to stop the attack. Right? So what is the one thing that we know about ransomware? What is the one thing that every strain of ransomware will do no matter what? We know there are variants in the way the attack takes place or the way the ransomware is going to spread across the network. But the one thing that every ransomware does is that it encrypts files, right? It encrypts data. We know this. So what we can make use of this knowledge, to set up auditing and tracking in our environment so that we're tracking file modifications, renames, encryptions. We're tracking all of these activities happening in our file server and other systems, so that if several events happen within a short time frame, that could be ransomware, right? Because if we normally have a couple of file modifications happening every now and then on our file server, but suddenly we get 100 modifications happening within a few seconds, that could mean that ransomware has been deployed, has been launched on the file server. So here is where we want to be tracking a set of events like modifications and renames and encryptions, because we know ransomware is going to do this. It's going to do this. It's going to be mass encryption, so it's going to do a lot of this within a short time. It's really fast. So we want to ensure that as soon as it starts to encrypt files and folders, as soon as mass encryption gets initiated, we want to get alerts to detect ransomware. And this is going to be important for detecting the attack. We obviously want alerts. So what we have to do is we need to ensure that there is a real-time auditing mechanism in place in our file servers, so that then the launch of an attack, the launch of ransomware can be detected in real time, and then we can automate the response. So as soon as our system detects that there's possible ransomware activity happening on the file server, it immediately takes action to shut down the system, after which we would have gotten the alert that there was ransomware activity and the file server got shut down. So we get the alert in real time so that we immediately go and look into the attack, quarantine the file server, recover the encrypted data, provided we have backup in place. So you can see why backup is important even in responding to ransomware. And then we simply put back that file server on the network. Easy does it. We're back up and running. So this is a sure shot way of responding to ransomware. You want to ensure that you have an auditing mechanism, real-time auditing mechanism in place in your file server, so that you can detect ransomware as soon as any known ransomware activity has been detected by in your environment. This will then automatically trigger a shutdown of the file server, after which you can quarantine the machine, recover the data, and put the server back into the network. So this is the only sure shot way of actually detecting, responding to, and recovering from ransomware. You want to have an incident detection and response mechanism in place in your environment, and you want to ensure that you have backup in place, right? So so you so you have to just oh, just a minute. I think we're having some more audio issues. Let me just pause for let me just pause for a few seconds and see what I can do. I'm so sorry about that again. Right, so I think it should be okay now. We've just reconnected to the network. A bit of a network related difficulty we've been having for the past half an hour. Very unfortunate that it just started as soon as we connected to the webinar. But I hope it should be okay for the next 10 minutes that we have left in the webinar. Thank you so much for still staying connected, and really appreciate the troubleshooting help that we were getting on the live chat. So I guess that's the benefit of doing a webinar with IT pros, that we get troubleshooting experience even while we're hosting the webinar. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for staying with us. So I think we should be fine for the rest of the webinar. Right. So we were just looking at how we want to set up an incident detection and response mechanism to combat ransomware. And to do this, of course, we need a file auditing solution in place, right? So we kept saying, I kept using the word, you want to have an auditing mechanism set up in your environment so that your environment can detect ransomware. So of course, you need to have some solution or some tool in place that can do this for you, right? A tool that can achieve real-time auditing on your file servers so that it can then detect ransomware and then immediately shut down ransomware as soon as it shut down the system as soon as it detects ransomware, so that you can then quarantine the system, and with your backup in place, you can recover the data and put the server back in the network. So this is the only sure shot way really to detect, respond to, and recover from ransomware. And we're going to be able to do that with File Audit Plus. We're going to be able to automate threat response using File Audit Plus, which is Manage Engine's real-time agent-based file server auditing solution. Right? So this is really important because we at Manage Engine, we actually have different tools that can achieve file auditing. And our other tools, what they do is those tools are more into compliance and reporting and alerting. And what they do is they use the event logs from your Windows server, and they use these logs to then track different event IDs and give you reports about the files being changed and modified and accessed and all of those things. But what File Audit Plus does is it doesn't use the event logs, right? Because the event log mechanism is not going to be as fast as what File Audit Plus can do. And if you're wondering what File Audit Plus does differently, is that it uses an agent, right? So what happens is you will be installing an agent on your Windows server, the File Audit Plus agent. And what it does is that it can communicate directly with the operating system, and based on the interrupts it receives, it knows when files are being modified and touched and changed and renamed and things like that. So because of that, it is as close to real time as it possibly can be, because it doesn't have to wait for a log to get written, and it doesn't even have to wait those extra few seconds for the log to be generated and collected and parsed and things like that. Instead, what it does is, as soon as a change happens to one of the files and folders, File Audit Plus is able to detect that in real time. So as a result of that, when several modifications happen within a short period of time, when several files get encrypted or several files get renamed or several files get modified within a few seconds, File Audit Plus is able to detect that activity as ransomware activity and immediately automate the shutting down of that particular of the infected server. So I just want to jump into the um, File Audit Plus into the tool to just sort of show you what it means to configure an alert in File Audit Plus, right? Because you might be wondering, okay, it sounds ideal, it sounds like something you need. You want to have something that's automatically auditing your file servers in real time, automatically detecting ransomware, and automatically shutting down ransomware. So if you're wondering how exactly to configure alerting on File Audit Plus, it's really simple. As you can see from the user interface, you just be choosing an alert profile name. I'm just going to call it ransomware alert, a description for the alert. I'm just going to say ransomware alert again. So you want to choose the severity of the alert. It's obviously a critical event. And then you really, what you need to do then is to choose which are the objects that you want to monitor and what action you want the alert for. So if you look at the different actions that are available, I'm just going to have to log in again actually, because we lost the network connectivity in the middle. You guys can also check out demo.fileauditplus.com. It's an almost fully functional online demo of the product. Really useful if you're looking to get a look and feel of how the solution can work. I also encourage you to look at File Audit Plus's website that I have opened right now. And what you can do is you can, in case you're looking at an online, if you want a web-based demo from one of our tech support members, I'm just going to send this link on the live chat for the benefit of all our attendees. Let me just navigate to chat. So I've just sent a link on the live chat. So in case you want to explore File Audit Plus further and schedule a personalized web demo, a 15 to 20-minute call with our product consultants, you can schedule this over here for free so that you get all your questions clarified over the call. Right, so I'm sorry about that. Just jumping back to the File Audit Plus alert configuration. So you're going to be configuring. So you're going to be configuring an alert for detecting ransomware. Basic steps: name the alert, give the description, choose a severity, and then here's the interesting thing: you get to choose the actions for which you want the alert. Right? So you can choose, say, for example, let's see, we have file extension change. You can have an alert set up for file extension changes happening in your file server, and you can set a threshold. So you can see that part of the configuration right here. So you can just say you have, I'm just saying 100 file extension changes happening within 1 minute. So this could be ransomware activity, right? So you would have chosen of course, you would have chosen the server that you want to monitor. I'm not going to go through the entire configuration. I'm just trying to show the key aspects of the alert configuration. So what you can do is you can have two different alerts. One is this one, where you have file extension change. You have 100 of those happening within a minute. You can change these values as per your requirements. So if this happens, you get a real-time notification and you can execute a command. So here you can choose a bat file which comes preloaded with the product. You can just point to the path of a file called shutdown.bat. So this would be available in the product installation folder. So you can just point to that location so that when this alert gets triggered, this command gets executed. And the command, what it does is it shuts down the file server. So this is one alert. When you have 100 file extension changes happening within a minute, the server gets shut down. Automatic threat response. And of course, you can also go ahead and set up a few more alerts. You can make use of, instead of file extension changes, you can make use of modifications. So if you have same idea, if you have say 100 modifications happening within a short period of time, you can again execute the same command to shut down the server. So you just have to configure a few alerts like these with the tool, which is very intuitive, as you can see. And once you have these alerts configured, File Audit Plus is going to be in real time auditing your file server so that as soon as it detects potential ransomware activity, it's going to execute this command and shut down the file server. And then of course you can go ahead, quarantine the system, reload your backed up data, and ensure that you're up and running again. You don't have to pay the hackers so long as you have the system of incident detection and response and data backup. Right? So this is the real key takeaway that I wanted to give in today's webinar. Focus on incident detection and response. Over and above all the security best practices that you want to implement, ensure that you have incident detection and response set up in your environment. Ensure that you have backup in place so that not only are you reducing the chance of being hit by an attack, but also if an attack happens, you are in a position to detect, respond to the attack, and recover from the attack without paying the hackers. Right? So this is what you can achieve using File Audit Plus, the incident detection and response. In case you have any questions, please keep them coming on the live chat and we'll keep answering them. Once again, my sincere apologies for the network issue that we faced for a bit over the course of the webinar. Thank you for still staying connected to the webinar. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much also for taking time off from your busy schedules for making it to the session. I hope you found the session informative. So do take a moment at the end of the webinar to fill up the feedback and let us know what you liked or didn't like about the webinar. Please suggest more topics for future webinars and we take them seriously, and we'll hopefully host them over the course of the next couple of months. So keep your questions coming. You can email us at support@fileauditplus.com if you want to know more about the product. The product itself is very easy to set up and deploy and get up and running within a few hours, really. So make sure that you explore File Audit Plus on the website, as well as if you need, you can email our support email ID as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Keep the questions coming. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great day ahead.